In this video, we'll talk about acceptable use policy. Organizations will have numerous security policies related to how business processes are to be conducted within the company and also how IT systems are to be used. So, the acceptable use policy then is part of the overall organizational security policy. Now, user training and awareness is crucial in order to make this information known to employees within the company. There needs to be user acknowledgement of acceptable use policies for IT systems during the employee onboarding process when they're newly hired. We might also consider the use of logon banners on our devices on the network, including Windows and Linux workstations, so that prior to user logon, there is a banner or an alert that pops up that states something to the effect that the machine should only be used for business purposes. So, the proper use of IT systems then within the company is part of the acceptable use policy. The acceptable use policy is a document, and you should really make sure you involve legal counsel when structuring this for an organization. So, an example of this, in terms of a structure, would be having a purpose of the acceptable use policy, which normally is to protect employees and business interests. Then, the scope of it, for example, we might have an email acceptable use policy versus a VPN acceptable use policy. Then, of course, it would define unacceptable use. In the case of email, that would be harassment of any kind sent to others through the mail messaging system. There would also need to be a section that lists consequences. In the case of email unacceptable use, it might be suspension from work. Of course, there needs to be a definition of terms like there would be in any type of longer document, especially a legal document. The email acceptable use policy might include things like no harassment, including sexually harassing email messages or anything involving racial slurs through email. The internet acceptable use policy might include things such as no visiting of pornographic sites. Social media acceptable use policies might prohibit the use of Facebook or Twitter and other social media. However, in some cases, maybe it's only allowed during breaks. The consequences, there could be legal prosecution in some cases. It depends on the nature of the infraction. So, for example, adults viewing adult pornography is technically not illegal in most parts of the world, but obviously it's unprofessional at work. So, even though they might be suspended or demoted or potentially lose their job, there might not be any type of legal prosecution beyond that. In this video, we discussed acceptable use policy.